Tonight on Dreamspaces, city centre living you can actually afford. Inside the building that taste forgot. Britain's new bridges, get over them. And Mrs. Doyle on why Ireland's National Gallery is her cup of tea.
Wherever you live in the UK, affordable accommodation in city centres is increasingly hard to find. House prices are growing at a rate not seen since the 1980s boom. Key workers, such as teachers and nurses, can't keep up with this price explosion. They're being forced out, and without them, cities just don't work. It's a real problem. But not a new one. From 19th century tenements to 20th century tower blocks, we're still struggling to find ways to house the country's population. Now, 21st century design and technology are being applied to an old idea with a dubious reputation.
Houses and quickly. That's the answer 9 out of 10 people all over Britain give when asked what's number one on the country's priority list of wants.
After the war, thousands of prefabricated bungalows were the government's answer to the housing crisis.
And if we're not mistaken, that's a complete house on the way. Just a lorry load of love nest.
The plan has been inspired by places like this, Murray Grove Flats in Hackney. It's prefabricated, modular, and it's even won 9 awards for good design in the 2 years since it was finished. Just by looking at it, you'd never know these 30 flats were made in a factory and assembled on site in just 10 days. The whole process took only 7 months, half the time of traditional building, meaning people could move in a whole year faster. Cartwright Pickard's second modular development here in York learnt many lessons from Murray Grove. This is a constantly evolving and developing process. Here, the modules were made larger, so you need fewer of them. It allowed the building to be built even more efficiently and quickly. Making the components in a factory has all sorts of advantages over old-fashioned building sites. They're better made because, being made in a factory, there's far higher levels of quality control. They're better designed because mass production means you can spend longer getting it right in the first place. And they're quicker to build because they're totally finished before arriving on site, down to light fittings and the kitchen cupboards. And once they're in place, you've no idea where they came from.
I was living in a very small flat, much smaller than this one, brick built.
Yeah.
This is much warmer.
Yeah, bigger.
Much, much bigger.
Yeah.
And from what I can gather, it's going to be more cost efficient as well. I love the fact that it's so spacious and airy. It's very convenient for me. I work just up the road.
So there isn't any of this paper box thing that people try and associate with kind of modular prefabricated buildings?
No, I don't hear my next door neighbour at all.
So, I mean, you think this should be the model that we go on and we make a lot more housing this way? You think it kind of makes a lot of sense?
Most definitely, because there's such a shortage of affordable housing.
The result of all this cost and time cutting has had no detrimental effect on the building. It feels very well made. It's made from very nice materials. In fact, you're very hard pressed to know it's a modular building at all. So it seems to me that this form of construction has got a very bright future, and the only thing that needs to change is the public's perception. Prefabrication can save you money, but then so can fitting more flats on less land. It was combining these two ideas that led architect Piercy Connor to design the microflat. At 34 square metres, this revolution in city living is so small that Selfridges fitted one in the window of their London store as an experiment to see what they'd be like to live in.
There were lots of comments like Helen, who stayed there, just said there's just nowhere for my shoes. She had 60 pairs of shoes. Now, you know, being honest about it, we designed it ourselves, and I've got like 3 pairs of trainers. So it's like a learning process, it really was.
They found the size of it, they actually didn't find that problem. They actually found it to be a lot bigger than what they thought.
Yeah.
And then couldn't understand why we were calling it a microflat.
I think one example is like a cachette, you know, that you go across France in overnight trains.
Yeah.
You know, and they have lots of excellent stainless steel sinks and tiny taps. So borrowing all that stuff, you can actually reduce down by about 50% all the utility areas into one little unit. And that unit sits in the middle of our building with a bedroom on one side and a lounge on the other side.
You just have to design it smaller and more efficiently so we could get value out of the site to make it work.
And the thing that we focused on is the middle section, the kind of 60% of people in London who are on fairly good salaries, but they've got no capital because they spend it all just living in London.
Yeah.
It's that group of people, and also people who appreciate design. I mean, you know, 100,000 is still quite expensive for a small flat, but we're spending a lot of time on materials. You know, we don't want to just make the thing out of MDF and paint it. You know, what we're looking at now is stacking up all kinds of uses. So you start at the bottom with retail, and then you stack up above that offices, and then put microflats on top.
Even at the relatively low price of a microflat, it still leaves a lot of people struggling to get on the property ladder. But there is an even cheaper solution. This recycled city in East London is made from old shipping containers. Currently used as artist studios, they're about to become low-cost homes.
They just are wonderfully manipulable. They're strong, they're waterproof, they're instant, they're ubiquitous. They are exactly standard. Wherever you go in the world, if you take your tape measure with you, they are within millimetres the same sizes.
So what do you do to take a container and make it into a studio or a house?
Well, essentially a container is just the box, and inside everything is much the same. What we've done that's different is to connect them together so that they do make rooms that you would recognise as rooms by adding 3 of them together, and you come to a nice square Georgian room. They're very strong things, so you can cut a lot of them out. They don't fall to pieces. And if you try and cut a hole in a brick building, after a bit it falls down. Not so here. You know, that everything is contributing towards the strength. I'm told that new architects are looking all the time for the modular solution. We don't look very far, because every 40-foot truck that passes you on the road has got the modular solution sitting on its back.
Everything that we've seen here, I think, aesthetically is fantastic. I wouldn't mind living in any one of them. And when you add to that the fact that this is both cost-effective and space-efficient, you really have to start asking yourself, why do we continue building in a traditional manner? Is it because there is a lack of political will to get these kind of buildings built? Or is it because the traditional construction industry has too much vested interest in continuing to build in the way in which we always have? Either way, the people who suffer are the ones at the bottom of the property ladder, people like you and me.
Bucharest was once known as the Paris of the East. Fine 19th century architecture can still be found here. It's a little run down in places, but charming.
Until the 1980s, much of Bucharest used to look like this. But then, one man decided he could improve things.
Nicolae Ceausescu wanted to immortalize his rule with a new palace. Because he was a ruthless dictator with total power, no one argued. Until 1989, when he was shot during the Romanian Revolution. But by then, he'd built the House of the People, which was actually intended as a house for him and his wife, as well as the headquarters of the government and Communist Party. It's the second biggest building in the world. Only the Pentagon is larger. But quantity sure doesn't mean quality.
This is not a classical palace. It's just a large lump using ornament to try and make itself look grand. Its proportions are simplistic, and it ends up looking like a kitsch wedding cake.
Ask a small child to draw a palace with crayons, and it looks something like this. There are 13 floors, 3 kilometers of passageways, nearly 5,000 chandeliers, and 7,000 rooms.
Extraordinary rows of chandeliers, like strange nipples sort of coming out of the building. God, I don't know what to say, really. It looks like something out of the Moscow metro.
No expense was spared at a time when ordinary Romanians were living in poverty. Food, gas, and electricity were in short supply, but 20,000 people worked on this palace. Entire forests were cut down for the doors, and 1 million cubic meters of marble was mined from Transylvania.
God, what we have here is something which is essentially trying to outdo every sort of ancient world classical building, but it's built 10 years ago. I mean, this thing is brand new, but it's completely confused. It's Versailles, it's Baroque, it uses arcades. As an architect, I can't quite understand what all these styles are sort of doing in one small space. It's overwhelming and just sort of vulgar, really.
From the palace balconies, Ceausescu admired his handiwork. Huge apartments were built for his communist cronies, while a brand new road cut through the heart of the city. The boulevard of the victory of socialism is over 2 miles long. Ceausescu wanted something bigger than the Champs-Élysées, so his road is exactly 1 meter wider. To make room for all this, 3 entire neighborhoods were flattened. Down side roads are glimpses of what they used to look like.